Welcome to the Alibi Club. Tonight's story takes us back to the year 1518, to a city where something impossible began to happen. I didn't believe it at first, just sounded like another medieval myth until I saw the painting. Hidden beneath layers of smoke and varnish was a blur of twisted limbs, a woman with bleeding feet mid-step, a man collapsed with a smile carved on his face. The year was 1518. The place, Strasbourg, and for nearly a month they danced, not for joy, not for love, but like something or someone had taken over. I've been chasing the rhythm ever since, and if you listen closely, you can still hear the echo of their steps behind you. I've spent years digging into unsolved cases, chasing shadows, trying to make sense of things that don't want to be understood. But the dancing plague of 1518, that was different. That wasn't just strange, it was impossible. And like most impossible stories, it started quietly, with one woman, one step. Her name was Frau Trophäa. No one knew much about her. Not really. She wasn't royalty. She wasn't a known heretic or a midwife whispered about in alleyways. Just Frau Trophäa, a wife, maybe a widow. Her name shows up in only a few local records. No portrait, no journal, just one footnote in a city ledger, and a legend. According to the earliest reports, it was mid-July, 1518, in Strasbourg, part of the Holy Roman Empire at the time. A dense summer heat clung to the narrow streets. Bread was scarce. Disease hovered like breath on glass. People were tired in that deep, soul-heavy way. And then she started dancing. No music, no crowd, no festival, just Trophäa in the middle of the street, her body moving like it didn't belong to her anymore. Witnesses described it like she was in a trance, her eyes wide but unfocused, lips slightly parted, arms twisting like they were trying to break free from her own shoulders. She didn't respond to her name. She didn't eat. She didn't stop. That's where I got stuck the first time. The not stopping. See, I've investigated hysteria before. Panic attacks, crowd frenzies, even cases of shared psychosis in cult compounds. But this? She danced for nearly 6 days, without pause, with blisters bursting, feet bleeding, her body wearing itself down. Still she danced. Doctors at the time called it hot blood. Clergy called it the devil's grip. One letter I found, hidden in a monastery archive, used a phrase I haven't stopped thinking about since. The spirit moved her, but it was not her own. I tracked down a contemporary physician's journal, brittle with age, bound in faded red leather. His name was Paracelsus, an early pioneer of toxicology. He traveled to Strasbourg months after the outbreak. He didn't call it demonic. He didn't think it was God. He thought it was trauma. Oppressed by the heat of the stars and the ache of their sins, he wrote. Their limbs speak what their mouths will not. Maybe he was right. Maybe Trophäa wasn't just dancing. Maybe she was confessing. But here's what haunts me. The dancing spread, like fire on dry parchment. By the second day, 5 people joined her. By the third, over a dozen. And it wasn't joy. No one smiled. No one laughed. They were sobbing, screaming, grimacing. One witness said it looked like they were trying to shake something off their backs, like their own bodies were betraying them. I flew to Strasbourg to walk the same streets. Not for tourist photos, not for closure. I needed to feel the ground myself. The locals still talk about it, if you know how to ask. One old man, a former city archivist, leaned in and whispered to me in a cafe near the cathedral. They say her dance was a curse, that she stepped where no one should step. He tapped a map on the table, one of those tourist ones with cartoon buildings, but he marked a spot that wasn't labeled, a small square, once a grain market, now mostly forgotten. That's where she began. I went there. No memorial, no sign, just cobblestone and pigeons. I stood in the center, alone, and I swear, and I know how this sounds, I felt it, a tension in my spine, like static, like a violin string pulled too tight inside my chest. It passed after a few seconds, but it stayed in my memory, humming. Some say it was ergot poisoning, moldy rye that mimicked LSD. Others blame religious mania or collective trauma after years of plague and famine. But even if Tropea had eaten bad grain, what about the others? What about the timing? Why her? Why then? That's what led me to the monastery archives. And to something even stranger. A scroll, dated 1278, nearly 250 years before Tropea. It described a procession of children in a town called Erfurt who began dancing uncontrollably. The chronicler wrote, "They danced across the bridge until their feet broke beneath them, and still they moved, as if the world below called to them in song." The details were nearly identical. Wrong century, wrong city, but the same curse, which means Tropea wasn't the first, just the latest, at the time. That's what flipped the switch in my mind. This wasn't about Frau Tropea anymore. This was about a pattern, a choreography older than history, a rhythm that waited, silent, for someone like her, lonely, cracked open by grief or hunger, to hear it. And once she heard it, the world followed. I used to laugh at stories like these. Mass delusion, I'd say. Simple answers. But there's something about watching a woman dance herself to death that makes you ask harder questions. And I haven't stopped asking since. The thing about madness is, it never stays still. It spreads, like ink in water, like fire licking its way across dry wood. And in Strasbourg, it didn't take long before Frau Trophea's solitary dance became a citywide fever. Within a week, 32 people were dancing. Not at once, not like a carnival. It was staggered, random, like dominoes tipping in invisible rhythms. They twitched and spun, collapsed and rose again. Old men, housewives, children, all locked in the same terrifying ballet. The local authorities called emergency meetings. This was no longer a curiosity, it was a crisis. People were dying, literally dancing themselves to death. They collapsed from exhaustion, from dehydration, from broken bones and ruptured blood vessels. Some simply stopped breathing in mid-step. Their hearts gave out, no warning, just a sudden thud to the cobblestone. And then the dance continued, without them. I found one physician's letter in a private collection, housed in a Strasbourg University archive. His handwriting was uneven, slanted, smudged with what I hope was ink. He wrote, "Their feet strike the stone, as though compelled. Their faces are as masks of sorrow and strain. I attempted to restrain a young man with my own hands, but his limbs did not heed my strength. He begged me, 'Please, I can't stop.' That line followed me. I can't stop." It wasn't a cry for help. It was a confession. At this point, the city council panicked. The dancing wasn't just a spectacle anymore. It was disrupting markets, filling graveyards. And so, in one of the most baffling decisions I've ever encountered, they built a stage. Yes, a stage. They erected a wooden platform in the heart of the city and moved the dancers there. Why? Because they believed the only way out was through. Physicians of the time argued that the blood needed to heat and boil and purge, that the only cure was to let the dancing complete itself. So they hired musicians, drummers, pipers, fiddlers. Imagine that, people dying on their feet and a city adding a soundtrack to it. But here's the twist, it didn't help. The music made it worse. Eyewitnesses described the moment instruments began to play. The dancers surged forward, their limbs sharper, faster, almost violent. One baker wrote that it looked like the crowd had become one body, pulsing to a beat no one else could hear. He fled the city for a month, came back to find half his customers buried. And this is where things begin to tilt toward the unnatural. There are mentions, buried deep in private diaries, priestly journals, merchant letters, of visitors, strangers in cloaks, pale-skinned men who watched the dancers but did not speak. One local wrote of a woman with black eyes and braided silver hair who stood at the stage each night, always in the same spot, never moving, always smiling. And when the plague ended, she vanished. Coincidence? Maybe, but there's too much repetition to ignore. This wasn't just a medical event, this was ritual. The church, as expected, weighed in. At first they called it the devil's work. They held exorcisms. Processions of priests marched through the streets, chanting prayers, casting holy water on flailing bodies. But when that didn't work, their narrative changed. They declared the dancers weren't possessed, they were blessed. Let me repeat that. Blessed. In their desperation to explain the unexplainable, some clergymen claimed the dancers were channeling divine energy, that their suffering was redemption, that by enduring agony, they were lifting sin, not just their own, but the city's. Some priests even joined the crowd. I found a document detailing how 3 monks from a local monastery stripped off their robes and stepped onto the stage. They lasted mere minutes before one of them collapsed, cracking his skull open on the wooden floor. He died still clutching his rosary. The others never spoke again. So now the question becomes, epidemic or exorcism? Science today calls it mass psychogenic illness, shared stress, a population on edge. I've spoken to historians who explain it away with famine, fear, and group psychology. And maybe they're right. Maybe this was the body's rebellion against too much hunger, too much war, too much pain. A mass release. But I've also met survivors. Their descendants, I mean. Families who've kept journals and passed them down like heirlooms. And those journals describe something that doesn't sound like stress. It sounds like a summoning. One reads, "My great-grandmother said she heard the drums in her sleep, even when the streets were silent, that something whispered the steps in her ears, and when she awoke, her feet were bruised." I've checked city records. She was never officially listed as a dancer. I used to joke that every mystery has a rational explanation, but not anymore. Because when hundreds of people start dancing against their will, and the best solution the city offers is to keep playing the music, that's not science, that's sacrifice. And somewhere between the priest's chants and the fiddler's strings, Strasbourg became an altar. They say if you want to understand any mass tragedy before the 18th century, you follow the church. And Strasbourg in 1518 was no different. When hundreds of people began collapsing in the streets, moaning, convulsing, dancing like their joints had been replaced with marionette strings, the church didn't turn to science. They turned inward, and they found exactly what they were looking for: sin. It's strange, walking into Strasbourg Cathedral now. Quiet, dim. The air smells of old stone and burnt wax. But 500 years ago, those same walls echoed with panic. Clergy marched through the streets with crucifixes held high, muttering Latin prayers like spells. The dancers were labeled not as patients, but as penitents, broken vessels, flesh overwhelmed by guilt, shame, corruption. One cleric's sermon, recorded in a tattered parchment tucked inside a Dominican library, began with the line, "The body sins in silence and dances to confess." I read that line in a whisper, couldn't help it. The clergy believed this was divine punishment, that Strasbourg's people had invited wrath through greed, lust, heresy. Some said it was the plague, some said heretics, some said the rising influence of astrology or alchemy. But the consensus was clear. God was angry, and the dance was his whip. But then, something changed. The priests who first condemned the dancers began shifting their language, slowly, carefully, like they were afraid of contradicting something ancient. I found letters between abbots and bishops in neighboring cities, and the tone is eerie. They start to suggest that dancing isn't just punishment, it's purification, a path toward cleansing the soul. One bishop even described it as the Holy Ghost made visible, a trembling flame upon the flesh. That's when the church did something no historian seems to dwell on. They joined in, not physically, not at first, but spiritually. They began organizing pilgrimages. They declared that many of the dancers were being called by Saint Vitus, a martyred saint who had, oddly enough, become associated with nervous disorders and convulsions centuries earlier. They built shrines, processions, sent the dancers to mountaintop chapels. Some were carried on litters, others walked until their feet bled. The idea that Saint Vitus would absorb the affliction. I visited one of those shrines. It's still standing, crumbling but intact, hidden near Saverne, northwest of Strasbourg. Locals call it Chapelle du Silence, the Chapel of Silence. The walls are etched with faded depictions of writhing bodies, not graceful dancers, but contorted limbs, bent knees, upturned eyes. One carving shows a priest holding a cross in one hand, the other placed gently on the head of a girl mid-spin. There's a strange tenderness in the image, and a deep, twisted horror. Why? Because the girl is smiling, not with joy, with surrender. I stayed the night in that chapel. I know how that sounds, but I needed to understand, to be in the same space. I lit a candle, watched its shadow flicker across stone walls, and I swear to you, I heard it. A faint rhythm, not quite music, not quite silence, more like a heartbeat, not my own. Too slow, too deep, like the chapel itself was remembering. The church's logic made a kind of twisted sense. If this was divine punishment, then the cure had to be submission, not resistance, not medicine, but compliance. Let the dance finish what it started. Let the body burn itself clean. But that's not healing. That's theology turned into theater. And Strasbourg became its stage. The clergy even began writing new prayers, special invocations for the afflicted. One of them, found in the personal notebook of Father Matthias Frick, reads, "May your limbs be moved by the Lord's will. May your bones crack open to release the blackness. May you bleed so the city may heal." That's not mercy. That's sacrifice. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. It worked. Not as a cure, but as a belief. The people, desperate, starving, grieving from plague and war, they accepted it. Some began joining the dancers intentionally, out of guilt, out of fear, out of longing, to feel something in a world numb with loss, a collective trance, painted over with stained glass and scripture. I spoke to a historian who described it as a medieval form of atonement theater, a space where suffering was noble, where movement meant release, where madness had a script, and the church held the pen. But another scholar had a different theory. She believed the church didn't misunderstand the event, they recognized it. That this kind of dancing, involuntary, ecstatic, contagious, had deep pagan roots, ancient rituals of release, transformation, and possession. And by naming it St. Vitus's dance, the church wasn't explaining it, they were rebranding it. Because here's the truth that most textbooks won't print. Christianity didn't erase the old religions, it absorbed them, gave them new names, new hymns, new robes. So when hundreds danced in agony in the streets of Strasbourg, maybe the church didn't panic, maybe it remembered, and in remembering, it gave the city a new myth, a new rhythm, a rhythm we still haven't broken. You'd think the dancing plague began and ended in Strasbourg, that it was just a bizarre footnote in a medieval medical manuscript, a one-off, an accident. That's what I thought too, until I started tracing the pattern, until I started finding the others. Strasbourg was just one verse in a much older song. Go back to 1237 in Erfurt, present-day Germany. A chronicler wrote of over 100 children who began leaping and spinning uncontrollably in the streets. Their parents wailed, begged them to stop, but the children kept going, through fields, through rivers, across a bridge, and then collapsed. Some died, others never spoke again. Sound familiar? The official record describes it as a procession of possessed youth whose bodies moved without cause, and the bridge they crossed, it collapsed the following year. Locals rebuilt it, but they still call it Tänzerbrücke, the Dancer's Bridge. Then, 1374, in the city of Aachen, the same story. Swelling crowds, wild rhythmic motion, people screaming they were being pulled by invisible forces, claiming to see visions of the Virgin Mary, of demons with drumsticks, of flaming wheels turning in the sky. Whole towns swept up in waves of movement. Some tied pillows to their feet to cushion the bruises. Others wore garlands of thorns, believing it would satisfy whatever god or devil had called them. And then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. But it always returned. That's the pattern. I laid out a timeline in my studio one night, covered the wall with pins and thread like some cliché detective cliché. But when I looked at the map, the locations, the dates, it hit me. The outbreaks always followed the same conditions: famine, plague, fear, silence. Moments in history when entire cities were on the brink, when people were starving, mourning, waiting for something. And then, without warning, the dance begins. The medical historians I interviewed chalked it up to stress responses, trauma-induced mass hysteria. They pointed to similar events in modern times, laughing epidemics in East Africa, twitching outbreaks in American schools, mysterious fainting spells across whole villages in India. All inexplicable, all contagious, all dismissed. But what if these weren't random? What if we're not talking about a medical phenomenon at all, but a ritual? That's where I stumbled across an older tradition, one most people have forgotten: the danse macabre. It wasn't just a painting motif, it was a belief that death itself danced, that the Grim Reaper didn't walk, he twirled through towns, hand in hand with beggars, bishops, kings, and fools. It was the great equalizer, a dance you didn't get to decline. Now think about that. A culture where death was imagined as a partner in a waltz, where every step toward the grave had choreography. And now imagine that belief waking up. In Strasbourg, they blamed bad bread, ergot, a fungus that can cause hallucinations, convulsions, even death. But that same fungus existed in every city, every loaf. So why only certain years? Why only certain towns? I dug deeper, compared weather patterns, grain imports, and even celestial alignments. I know how that sounds, but when the rational stops making sense, the irrational starts sounding like a map. One thread kept resurfacing. These cities, these events, they all sat on the ruins of older worlds. Pre-Christian temples, pagan ritual sites, places where the body was once sacred, where trance wasn't pathology, it was prayer. I spoke to a woman in Alsace, a folklore keeper. White hair, cracked voice, memory sharp as a blade. She told me the stories her grandmother whispered by candlelight. There are songs that were never written down, only danced. Steps that belong to the earth, not to men. And when we forget them, the ground remembers. She said her cousin once sleepwalked in spirals until dawn. Said it happens more in certain villages. Said the land remembers, and sometimes it calls you back. I didn't believe her, not really, until I found the same story in an old Welsh folk tale and another in a Russian manuscript from 1492. Dancers who vanished into forests, circles burned into the soil, movements passed down like fingerprints. It's not just one culture, it's a buried language. What if the dance plague isn't madness? What if it's a resurgence, a forgotten ritual erupting through stress-cracked psyches? A communal memory triggered by catastrophe. Not demonic, not divine, just ancient. And here's the part that still makes my stomach turn. In every case I studied, someone always watched, an onlooker, silent, still, dressed in black or red or gray. One account from 1518 described a man with no eyes, clapping out the rhythm. Another from 1374 mentioned a veiled figure who never moved, even as the dancers fell dead at her feet. Witnesses or conduits? The more I read, the more it felt like these events weren't accidental. They were summonings, performances, not for us, but for something else. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. That's why I don't go to festivals anymore. Why I don't tap my foot when music plays in public. Why I flinch when I see crowds move in sync. Because what if that rhythm, that ancient choreography, is still beneath our skin? What if all it takes is one person to start the first step again? It started as a throwaway detail, something I almost ignored. One of the original accounts from 1518 said, though no minstrel played, their bodies moved in time, as though to music the rest of us could not hear. At first I chalked it up to metaphor, a poetic flourish in a priest's diary, but it kept appearing, in letter after letter, scrolls, parish records, even a merchant's invoice for delivering water to the dancers, all hinted at the same strange thing. The dancers weren't random, they were rhythmic, and then it hit me. They weren't just moving, they were following a beat. That's when I started pulling threads no one else seemed to notice. And what I found took me to the edge of something darker, something I wasn't sure I wanted to see. It turns out there's a phenomenon in acoustic science known as infrasound, frequencies too low for the human ear to consciously detect, but powerful enough to affect the body. Sounds you feel more than hear. They vibrate in your chest, your bones, your spine. Under the right conditions, they can cause anxiety, nausea, even hallucinations. Some frequencies have even been linked to unexplainable chills, feelings of dread, or the sense of being watched. One researcher in Geneva told me, "We found that exposure to a 17 Hz tone for just a few minutes made people's eyes water. Some swore the room was vibrating, but we were in a soundproof lab." Now imagine this, Strasbourg in the summer of 1518. Stone buildings tightly packed, narrow alleys, underground aqueducts echoing with centuries of use. What if the architecture itself, the very bones of the city, had become a kind of resonance chamber, a natural amplifier? One collapsed bell tower had fallen just weeks before the outbreak. The city blamed poor engineering, but what if it wasn't just bricks and bells that shook loose? What if it activated something beneath the city? A tone, a hum, a frequency, not music in the traditional sense, but vibration, possession by sound. You'd think it's a stretch. I did too. Until I came across something else, a forgotten theory by the 19th century scientist and musician Giuseppe Tartini, who believed certain combinations of tones could induce altered states of consciousness. He claimed to have received one of his most famous compositions, the Devil's Trill Sonata, in a dream, played to him by a shadowy figure at the foot of his bed. I found a copy of his notes in an antique shop in Venice. A single sentence was underlined twice. There are sounds which do not require ears to be heard, only a soul to be hollow enough to receive them. And maybe Strasbourg was hollow enough. Maybe the famine, the fear, the trauma. They didn't just weaken the people, they tuned them. Like strings pulled taut, just waiting for the right vibration to set them into motion. I interviewed a contemporary sound artist who studies liminal acoustics, the way sound behaves in thresholds, border zones, between waking and sleeping, between mind and body. She described cathedrals as living speakers. She said, if you walk into the right chapel at the wrong time, you might feel music that was never played because it never needed to be. She played me something, a reconstruction of what the frequencies might have been like under Strasbourg's streets. Sub-bass pulses, barely audible, but I felt it, deep in my sternum, a kind of primal pull. My breathing changed, my fingers trembled. For just a moment I understood. That's when she turned off the recording and said, now imagine living inside that sound for a month. It explained the synchronization, the unity, the trance-like obedience. It even explained why playing actual music only made things worse. The musicians hired by the city weren't curing the dancers. They were feeding the frequency, layering melody over vibration, making the invisible beat stronger. That detail always stuck with me. The cure was music, but the music was the disease. A few fringe researchers have suggested that the dance was a kind of acoustic infection, a sound so powerful it bypassed logic, morality, even physical limits. It didn't kill through poison or plague. It just made you move until you broke. And the dancers, every limb twitch, every spasm, were speaking a language of sound, not singing it, being sung by it. The scariest part, it might not be over. I found a report from the 1970s in a small town in central Turkey, a wedding where the guests began dancing uncontrollably. 4 people collapsed. The music wasn't anything unusual, but locals said they saw a strange man arrive just before it began. Tall, pale, no shoes. He didn't dance, he just watched, then he vanished. In every case I've studied, from Erfurt to Aachen to Strasbourg, someone always watches. Not a conductor, not an audience, a listener. Which brings me to a terrifying possibility. What if these outbreaks aren't random? What if they're performances? Ancient sonic rituals, echoing through time, looking for hollow vessels. We've always feared possession through touch, through demons, through curses. But what if the oldest possession of all is sound? And what if it's already started again? At first I thought the dancing plague was a freak accident, a natural disaster of the mind, some biological hiccup or mass psychological wound torn open by war, famine, and fear. But the deeper I went, the more it started to feel intentional, like someone had staged it. And then I found the letters. The first was hidden inside a folio of unrelated merchant records from 1519. It was folded neatly, sealed with cracked red wax, and unsigned. No name, just a symbol, a circle split by a single line, like a cracked eye. The handwriting was tight and deliberate. The message was worse. The dancers were chosen, not by God, not by devil, but by those who keep the old rhythm. It begins with one, always. And if the host survives, the dance can spread. You mustn't break the pattern. Let it burn. Let it burn. At first I thought it was a joke. But why would a merchant include it among his ledgers? I dug deeper, and that symbol, the cracked eye, kept surfacing. In 3 other outbreaks, it showed up on a tapestry from 1374 Aachen, embroidered onto a dancer's sleeve, on a stone carving in a ruined abbey outside Utrecht, and even, though faintly, on a bell recovered from the collapsed tower in Strasbourg itself. Same mark, same silent watcher. It wasn't until I visited the Bibliothèque Humaniste in Sélestat that I found the second letter. This one wasn't hidden, it was misfiled, indexed under choral arrangements, anonymous. But it wasn't a hymn, it was a confession. The writer, no name, again, claimed to belong to a guild, but not a guild for trade, a brotherhood of movement, as they called it. We do not play the music, we preserve it. When the world becomes too heavy, the rhythm must return, to lighten, to burn, to reset. They spoke of cities primed for rhythm, of conditions they watched for, misery, hunger, silence, and then a signal, a host. Fran Trophea? They described the process. First, an individual is chosen, someone vulnerable, emotionally hollow, spiritually cracked. Then the invisible key is used, a tone, a movement, a symbol seen only in dreams. Once the rhythm begins, it spreads and cannot be interrupted. It must run its course. If not, it consumes everything. It read like madness, but the references, the locations, matched reality. I compared dates. There were names of real council members, real streets, even a reference to a mill fire that wasn't public knowledge at the time. Whoever wrote it knew too much to be a hoax. And if they were telling the truth, that means someone was choreographing these outbreaks. I spoke with a fringe historian in Vienna, someone whose name I won't repeat for his own safety. He believes that the dancing plagues were not disease, nor miracles, but theater, controlled rituals performed by cloaked initiates, not for the public, but for something watching through them. He told me, the body is a spell, every muscle, every step. When enough bodies move together, in sync, they create a pattern that acts like a beacon, and that beacon calls something to listen. I asked him what listened. He didn't answer. He just got up, pulled down a scroll from his shelf, and unrolled it. It was a floor plan, not of a building, but of a dance. Spirals, angled steps, rotations, dozens of footprints, perfectly aligned. He said it matched the motion described by Strasbourg witnesses, and beneath the map, the cracked eye. It's not just a coincidence. These aren't just dancers. They're components in a larger mechanism, a clockwork ritual, a living geometry meant to unlock something. But here's where it gets worse. The rituals haven't stopped. There are modern versions. I found records of underground gatherings in the 1920s, masked balls held during the Spanish flu, invitations sealed with wax and no return address. Guests reported hours of movement without recollection. One man said he awoke barefoot in a snow-covered field 6 miles from the city. His feet were bleeding, but he remembered nothing except music with no instruments. In 1963, a psychiatric hospital in Poland reported a ward-wide episode. 8 patients stood up at once and began spinning in silence. 3 dislocated joints. 1 cracked his skull and smiled through the blood. No official cause ever found. A single orderly quit the next day. He wrote in his resignation letter, "They weren't sick, they were rehearsing." Even now, rumors float online, underground performances, unsanctioned flash mobs that vanish before the authorities arrive. I watched grainy footage from one, filmed in Berlin, 2017. A group of 7 people spinning in perfect unison in the middle of an abandoned station. No music, just rhythm. Then one by one they fall. One man keeps going, alone, for 12 minutes. No blink, no sweat. And when he stops, he turns to the camera and smiles. He has no memory of it. I tracked him down, but before I could make contact, he disappeared, gone, like the others. So now I wonder, is the plague coming back, or did it never stop? Are these outbreaks just flashes of something ancient, kept alive by people we don't see, in rituals we don't understand? And the scariest thought, what if it's not just about dancing? What if this is only the first movement in something much larger? It's easy to believe in monsters when they dance on cobblestone. Easier still when the story is 500 years old, safely locked behind the glass of history. But the more I pulled at the thread of the dancing plague, the more I began seeing echoes of it, not just in the past, but everywhere. What if we've been asking the wrong question? Not why did they dance, but why are we still dancing, in ways we don't even recognize? Most historians today write off the 1518 outbreak as a textbook case of mass psychogenic illness, a shared delusion, a collective mind fracture. Put enough stressed, starved, spiritually broken people together, and the brain, desperate to protect itself, splits outward, like a mirror dropped on stone. One shard twitches, the next one copies. Soon, they're all moving, but that explanation never sat right with me. I've spent time in trauma units. I've seen people in states of shock, grief, dissociation. I've watched communities react to tragedy, but I've never seen synchronized madness, not like this. So I started asking experts, psychologists, neuroscientists, trauma counselors. And here's what disturbed me most. They didn't all agree. One psychiatrist, veteran of refugee clinics and war zones, told me something I can't forget. Sometimes, when the mind is overwhelmed, it pushes everything into the body. If grief can't be spoken, it becomes a cough. If fear can't be faced, it becomes tremors. And if guilt becomes unbearable, it starts to dance. She described a case in northern Uganda, 2007, where a group of young girls began laughing uncontrollably during morning assembly. One minute they were fine, the next they were on the floor, gasping, convulsing. It spread. Dozens affected, some for hours, others for weeks. Doctors found no illness, no drugs, no toxins. It was labeled a laughing epidemic, but when asked what triggered it, one girl simply said, "We didn't want to cry anymore." That was my turning point. What if Strasbourg wasn't cursed? What if it was simply breaking? A city imploding under plague, famine, spiritual terror, and social collapse. And the people, lacking medicine, therapy, expression, found the only release the body could manage: movement. Not a disease, not a possession, but a language. A body language of sorrow. I went back to the source material, Trafa's case. Reread the early testimonies. Over and over again, people said she looked hollow, as if something had been taken from her. Not just sanity, not health, but something deeper. One witness wrote, her mouth was shut, but her arms screamed. Another, she did not look possessed, she looked abandoned. So maybe mass hysteria isn't madness at all. Maybe it's a kind of chorus, a grief so big it requires multiple people to express it. I kept digging, found parallel cases. Schools in the US where students fainted in clusters. Textile factories in Southeast Asia where women began shouting, convulsing, seeing ghosts. Always the same pattern: stress, repression, silence, then eruption. But here's where it gets strange. In every case, every single one, the behavior that spread wasn't random. It had form: laughter, shouting, crying, dancing, ritualized responses. Not chaotic, but choreographed. Like the body was remembering something it had no words for. There's a theory in psychology called somatic memory. The idea that trauma isn't just stored in the mind, but in the muscles, the tissues, the nervous system itself. That your hands remember shaking even if your brain forgets why. That your legs remember running, even if you don't recall the fear. Now take that idea and stretch it across hundreds of bodies. What if a whole town remembered something? Not consciously, not in dreams, but somatically. And what if that memory, that ancient, encoded rhythm, was triggered by hunger, by fear, by bells, by silence? What if Trophia didn't start the dance? What if she responded to it first? I interviewed a dancer, professional, modern, ballet-trained, who'd studied the phenomenon. She said, "When I improvise long enough, I lose the sense that I'm choosing my steps. Something else takes over, not supernatural, just deep, below thought, like the bones are doing what they've always done, long before I was born." She called it cellular memory, and suddenly, all the pieces clicked. The dancers of 1518, the silent processions of 1374, the children in Erfurt, the girls in Uganda, the patients in Poland. They weren't imitating each other. They were remembering the same thing, a movement buried deep in our species. From some old ritual, some forgotten ceremony, or maybe something that came before ceremony entirely. Instinct disguised as choreography. We've always danced around fires, at births, at deaths, in worship, in warning, and maybe, just maybe, in mourning. But what happens when you take that instinct and feed it suffering? You get Strasbourg. And here's the final layer that scares me most. In every modern outbreak of psychosomatic behavior, the authorities downplay it. They call it stress, overreaction, behavioral contagion. It's dismissed, medicated, forgotten, which means no one's really listening. And if no one's listening, the body will keep speaking louder until we all hear it again. It's not supposed to happen this way. The brain commands, the body obeys. That's the deal, right? We think, then we act. The brain says run, and the legs move. The brain says stop, and everything halts. But what if that line of command isn't as straight as we think? What if, sometimes, the body goes rogue? I started looking into neurology not out of curiosity, but desperation. The historical theories had gone stale. The spiritual ones went too far. I needed something that lived in the wires, the chemistry. And that's when I stumbled onto the basal ganglia. It's a part of your brain most people never hear about. Tucked deep in the center, primitive, silent, mechanical. But it's the reason you can walk without thinking, blink on cue, ride a bike after years, It's the conductor of automatic movement, the silent hand on the body's metronome, and it's vulnerable. One neurologist I interviewed, sharp, pale-eyed, always wore gloves, showed me brain scans from patients with disorders affecting this region: Parkinson's, Huntington's, Tourette's, conditions where the body ignores commands and starts moving on its own, not randomly, but in loops. Jerks, tics, dances of dysfunction, she told me. We've seen cases where people twirl in circles, hours, days, not psychological, neurological. The circuits are stuck, like a skipping record in flesh, a record, a loop, just like the dancers in Strasbourg. She ran an experiment years ago, stimulating the basal ganglia in a patient using deep brain electrodes. When the current hit a certain frequency, the patient's right arm rose involuntarily. When she adjusted it, the arm began to twitch, then the foot, then the leg. Now imagine, she said, that stimulation not coming from a wire, but from the world. That's when I remembered the infrasound theory, the low-frequency hums, the resonance. What if it wasn't metaphorical? What if it wasn't madness? What if it was a signal? A tone tuned to the right frequency could, theoretically, disrupt motor control. If it hit the basal ganglia, you could induce movement, repetitive, relentless, rhythmic. And if that tone lasted long enough, the movement would hardwire itself. One neuroscientist described it like this: the brain is plastic, meaning the more you do something, the more your neurons build pathways to repeat it. Even if you hate what you're doing, even if it's hurting you, the loop doesn't care. He called it maladaptive motor memory, a learned movement that becomes involuntary through repetition and stress. It's been observed in trauma survivors, soldiers, even abused children. They rock back and forth, bite their lips, tap their feet, not because they want to, because their bodies never got the message to stop. Now picture that on a citywide scale. Frau Troffa, maybe unknowingly, becomes the first loop. Then others observe her, mirror her, and soon their basal ganglia, under siege from malnutrition, trauma, spiritual terror, starts coding the movement as automatic. The mind disconnects. The loop lives on. No more willpower, no more intention, just motion. One researcher told me about a particularly chilling phenomenon called pseudo-seizure mimicry, where individuals experiencing a psychosomatic crisis unconsciously imitate epileptic seizures they've seen but never had. Their brains literally construct the symptom, not to fake it, but because the boundary between observation and embodiment breaks down. In Strasbourg, hundreds saw dancers, and their brains downloaded the rhythm, not because they wanted to, because they couldn't help it. Even more disturbing, it works both ways. I came across a case in modern Japan. A woman experienced severe, unexplained tics after viewing footage of a girl having spasms on television. It took less than 2 weeks for the symptoms to replicate, but when scanned, her brain showed no sign of epilepsy, no trauma, just repetition, mirror neurons gone haywire, a mental loop that became physical. It reminded me of something a ballet teacher once told me. You learn a move not when you do it, but when you watch someone else do it, over and over again. In other words, the body watches, and it remembers. So now I ask, what if the dancing plague wasn't just infection of the flesh, or the spirit, or the crowd? What if it was a contagious loop, the kind that bypasses choice, that wears itself into your neural pathways like footsteps in sand, until the path is so deep you can't leave it. You just keep moving. And if that's true, then it means the dancers of 1518 didn't want to die on their feet. They simply couldn't stop the code. Somewhere between trauma and muscle, Between sound and cell, they got rewired, not possessed, not cursed, just reprogrammed. And that's the thought that's hardest to shake, because it means any of us, if pushed hard enough, broken deep enough, triggered just right, might start moving too. Not because we're sick, but because we were built that way. I used to think we were safe from it, that whatever madness gripped Strasbourg in 1518 was locked in time, a relic of superstition, famine, and ignorance. Something that couldn't reach us now, not in the age of science, surveillance, and sanity. But I don't think that anymore. Not after what I saw in Berlin. It was 2018. I had just finished a short documentary on mass hysteria for a university project and was in Germany to interview a neurologist who'd done pioneering work on mirror neurons and emotional contagion. The interview went well, straightforward, clinical. But as we were packing up, she said, almost casually, "If you want to see something interesting, there's a performance happening tonight. Underground. No cameras, no tickets, just rhythm." That phrase, just rhythm, hit me harder than it should have. She gave me a location, an old subway station, decommissioned, tucked beneath layers of graffiti and rot. I showed up late. The platform was dimly lit by flickering fluorescents, and a small group had already gathered. No one talked, no music played. And then someone started to move. It was subtle at first, just a sway, a twitch of the fingers, a slow turning of the head. Then another person moved, then another. No one spoke, no one smiled, and yet, within 10 minutes, they were all in motion. But it wasn't random, it was patterned. Arms curling inward, feet tapping out a precise rhythm. Circles formed, hands raised at the same angle. I recognized the steps. I'd read about them, seen them sketched in 16th century manuscripts, footprint diagrams drawn by monks. They were dancing the Strasbourg pattern. My stomach turned cold. I stood there, watching, frozen. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. One by one, the dancers turned and walked into the shadows, silent, breathless, like the air itself had shut off. One man, maybe 25, stared directly at me as he passed. His pupils were huge. He whispered one word, rehearsal. That's when I knew. This isn't over. The plague wasn't an anomaly. It was a template, a formula, one that certain people or certain groups have learned to activate. Not for art, not for healing, but for testing. Because if movement is contagious, if trauma loops, if the body can be reprogrammed, then dancing is just the beginning. And here's the terrifying part. Our modern world is more vulnerable than ever. Strasbourg was isolated, limited communication, no media, no mass exposure. But now, a video goes viral in seconds. A rhythm spreads globally in minutes. Every platform is an amplifier, every screen a window. What if the next outbreak doesn't happen in a square, but in a live stream? You've seen it already. Choreographed movements catching like fire. One person posts a challenge, and within days, millions are doing it. They laugh, they dance, they mimic. But beneath it, something deeper stirs, and sometimes it turns dark. 2020, TikTok. Dozens of teenagers posting videos of involuntary tics and spasms. Doctors blamed social contagion, anxiety. But some neurologists found that many of the symptoms didn't match any known disorder. They weren't faking. They were copying a loop they didn't understand. And here's a detail no one mentions. In some of the early clips, before the twitching starts, there's a faint hum, a background noise. Low, repetitive, almost rhythmic. I isolated the sound. It's 17 hertz. The same infrasound frequency linked to fear, hallucination, and motor disruption. Coincidence? Or are we building the next Strasbourg, one loop at a time? I found another case, a flash mob in Buenos Aires that ended with ambulances, not from injuries, from collapses. 17 people lost consciousness mid-movement, not due to heat, not due to exertion. Their vitals were normal. What wasn't normal? Every single one of them reported the same phrase. It felt like someone else was moving me. I used to think the plague would need famine or war to return. That modern stability protected us. But now I realize we're starving in other ways. Emotionally, spiritually, existentially. Our minds are loud. Our bodies are restless. Our identities fragmented across platforms, timelines, and faces we don't recognize. We're primed, tuned, waiting, just like Strasbourg. And what if someone, some group, knows that? What if the underground performances aren't experiments, but warnings, or worse, summons? Because the dancers of 1518 didn't just collapse, they recruited. Trophia started alone, but within weeks, hundreds followed. The pattern is always exponential, a loop that feeds itself. So maybe the next outbreak won't be one person spinning in a square. Maybe it'll be thousands. Maybe we won't even call it an outbreak. We'll call it content. We'll share it. We'll repeat it. We'll clap along without ever realizing we've joined the dance. And by the time we feel the ache in our legs, the sting in our souls, the rhythm pulsing in our spine, it'll be too late to stop. There's a line investigators aren't supposed to cross, the one between observation and involvement. You dig, you document, you report, but you don't participate. You never let the case touch your bones. I broke that rule in Strasbourg. It was winter when I went. Snow layered the rooftops, but the streets were dry, almost brittle. The city doesn't market the dancing plague anymore. Too dark, too strange. But if you ask the right people, if you walk past the tourist cafes and press your hand to the old stones, the city remembers. I stayed in a small apartment near the river. Cheap, unremarkable, except for the balcony. It overlooked what used to be the market square, the very place where Frau Trophea first moved her feet. I told myself I was there to study, to finish the story. I had one last interview with a local folklorist, but that night something pulled me from sleep. Not a sound, a feeling, like gravity, but sideways, like my spine was being rearranged. I sat up in bed, heart thudding, palms damp. The air was still, no sound outside, but my legs were tingling, not pain, not numbness, a pulse, like blood rushing with purpose. I stood up without thinking, stepped onto the cold floor, and walked to the window. The square was empty, but the rhythm was there. I don't know how else to explain it. It wasn't audible, it wasn't music, it was underneath everything. Like my body had tuned into something ancient and low, something pressing through the stone and air and silence. I could feel it in the arches of my feet, in my wrists, in my jaw. I stood there for almost an hour. Then, slowly, my fingers curled into a half gesture I'd seen in those old engravings, the ones of the Strasbourg dancers. Elbow bent, palm open, head tilted just so. I snapped out of it when my phone vibrated. A text from a friend back home. Just a meme. Something stupid. But the light broke the trance. I didn't sleep after that. I told myself it was imagination, sleep deprivation, stress. But the next morning, I found mud on the floor, not from my boots, and my calves ached like I'd run for miles. Still, I stayed. I kept researching, interviewed the folklorist, She spoke about the second beat, a local legend that says the plague wasn't the end of something, but the first movement, that there are more to come, that the true ritual has 3 acts, and the first was only the prelude. She said, "The rhythm never stops. It only waits for someone to hear it again." I laughed, tried to keep things clinical, but she didn't. She leaned forward and whispered, "Don't tap your foot, don't hum, don't nod to anything unless you know where the music came from." That night, I made a mistake. I played one of the reconstructed sound experiments, the 17 Hz frequency layered with reverb and cathedral acoustics. I was alone, lights dimmed, notebook open. 5 minutes in, I was rocking in my chair. 10 minutes in, my pen had scribbled the same shape over and over again. A circle with a single vertical line. The cracked eye. I shut the file, poured cold water over my face. But the rocking didn't stop. I sat on the floor and held my knees. The motion kept trying to restart, like a wind-up toy half wound, waiting. Eventually, it faded. But the next morning, the mark was on my wrist, drawn in pen, faint but unmistakable. I don't remember doing it. I booked my flight home that day. Since then, I've avoided rhythm, no music, no dancing. I even avoid certain phrases, cadences, speech patterns. I speak in broken sentences sometimes, on purpose, to prevent my thoughts from becoming loops. But it's hard, because the world is built on rhythm. We walk in step, we speak in beat, our hearts pulse, our breath follows. And every now and then, I feel my body slip, just a little. A finger twitches in threes, my foot taps on tile, and I wonder, what if I didn't survive Strasbourg? What if part of me stayed, moving still, under the stones? There's a theory I read, buried deep in the notes of a forgotten anthropologist. He said some dances aren't meant to be performed, they're meant to be absorbed, like scripture, like poison. Once you witness them, they live inside you. Maybe that's what happened to me. Maybe that's what's happening now, to all of us. The plague was never about death. It was about surrender, a ritual of relinquishing control. And I fear I followed it too far, because even as I sit here writing this, my heel is moving. I haven't heard a single note, and yet, somehow, I know the next step. They called it a mystery, a mass hysteria, a freak event. But that doesn't explain the rhythm. It doesn't explain the pattern. Across centuries, across continents, people moving in sync without music, without memory, without choice. It doesn't explain the marks, the diagrams, the whispers, the shapes burned into wood and stone and skin. It doesn't explain the letters, the veiled witnesses, the watchers in the crowd who never dance. I came looking for an answer. Instead, I found a ritual, not one built with altars and chants, but with blood and motion and silence. We like to believe we're in control, that our thoughts guide our bodies, that free will is real. But what if the truth is more fragile than that? What if a single loop, one step repeated too many times, is all it takes to hand over the reins? Frau Trophea didn't cry for help. She didn't scream. She just moved. And the city followed, because deep down, I think we're all waiting for a rhythm that tells us what to do. That relieves us of the burden of choice. That turns grief into motion, silence into purpose. Dancing doesn't just express emotion, it replaces it. And once you start, stopping feels like betrayal. That's the real horror of Strasbourg. Not the death, not the madness, the obedience. The way hundreds of people, from bakers to monks to children, surrendered their bodies to a rhythm they couldn't name. And if that rhythm returns, if it hasn't already, The next plague won't come with rats or sores. It will come in steps. It will come on beat. And by the time we realize we've joined in, we'll already be moving.